to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, a quiet place where your thoughts can loosen their grip and drift away. And tonight you'll be carried to a hidden burrow, carpeted in moss and scented with mint, where gentle magic hums beneath the earth. You are here now, and there is nothing you need to do but rest. Let your body settle into whatever position feels most comfortable. Feel the way the surface beneath you holds you up without asking anything in return. Allow your shoulders to soften, your jaw to unclench, your tongue to rest easily in your mouth. If your eyes are open, let them grow heavy. If they are closed, let the darkness behind your eyelids become velvety and kind. Take a slow breath in, as though you are sipping warm air through a straw. Pause just for a moment at the top of the inhale, then breathe out as if you are gently fogging a pane of glass. Again, a calm breath in, unhurried and quiet, and then a long, smooth exhale that empties you like a tide drawing back from shore. With every breath, the day loosens. With every exhale, it slides farther away. Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of a sleeping woodland at twilight. The sky is neither fully bright nor fully dark, but somewhere in between, like a soft, gray-blue blanket being pulled over the world. The air is cool and clean. It smells faintly of damp leaves and distant pine. Somewhere a small stream speaks in a low voice over stones. You don't have to walk anywhere quickly. You don't have to solve anything. You can simply be guided, step by slow step, into a place where everything is gentle and safe. And as you breathe, the forest comes closer, not rushing, but approaching like a dream that knows your name. The path ahead is cushioned with needles and fallen petals. The trees bow slightly as if offering a quiet welcome. You feel yourself relaxing into the scene as though the woodland is holding you too. Now the story begins to drift outward away from you, becoming something you can simply listen to, like rain tapping softly on a window. In the woodland at twilight, there was a narrow path that many creatures knew, but few humans ever noticed. It was not marked by signs or stones, but by a subtle change in the air. Those who wandered close enough would feel it, a coolness that seemed to hum, a freshness like crushed mint leaves, a calm that slipped into the bones. The path wound beneath arching branches and between fern fronds that leaned in, feathery and green. Where the light touched the ground, it became a pale wash of silver, as though the moon was practicing before night properly arrived. The forest carried a patient hush, not empty, but full of listening, full of slow life, full of small movements that didn't need to be seen to be real. A gentle breeze wandered through, stirring the moss on fallen logs and coaxing the scent of mint from somewhere hidden. It was the kind of breeze that never pushed. It only invited. Deeper in, where the trees grew older and the roots rose like knuckles from the earth, there was a hill that looked ordinary at first glance. It was covered in soft moss, and small white mushrooms dotted its sides like tiny lanterns unlit. A few wildflowers had chosen to bloom there, pale and quiet, as though they were whispering their colors into being. If anyone had paused long enough, they might have noticed that the air around the hill felt slightly warmer, like the gentle breath of something sleeping. At the base of the hill, half hidden behind a curtain of hanging ivy, there was an opening no wider than a fox's den. Its edges were lined with thick moss, and from within came the faintest glow, as soft as a candle behind frosted glass. The scent of mint was stronger here, cooling and sweet, threaded with the damp richness of earth. This was the Burrow of Moss and Mint. It had been there longer than most of the trees could remember, not because it was ancient in the heavy way of stone ruins, but because it belonged to a quieter kind of time. The burrow existed in the way a lullaby exists, always ready to be hummed, always waiting for someone to need it. On that evening, as twilight folded into night, a small creature made its way along the path toward the hill. The creature was a dormouse, round and soft, with whiskers that quivered as it sniffed the air. It moved carefully, not from fear, but from the natural patience of those who live close to the ground. Its paws made no sound on the, mossy earth. The dormouse had a name, though it wasn't a name spoken aloud very often. In the language of small woodland beings, it was called Brindle, which meant something like warm, brown, and safe. And it suited the dormouse perfectly. Brindle had spent the day gathering comforts, not necessities exactly, for the forest provided those. Brindle gathered the things that made the world feel kind, a feather that had drifted down from an owl's wing, light as a sigh, a dry, curled leaf that still held the memory of sunlight, a sprig of wild mint, bright and cool between the paws, a bit of soft grass woven into a loop to be used later as a tiny pillow. As Brindle neared the ivy curtain at the base of the hill, the air changed, becoming softer and more still. The burrow's faint glow touched the dormouse's whiskers, painting them with a gentle shimmer. Brindle paused, as if listening to the quiet hum inside. Then, as though answering an invitation, Brindle slipped through the opening. Inside, the burrow expanded into a round chamber that felt larger than it looked from the outside. The walls were packed earth, but they were covered in thick moss that glowed with a muted green light. The moss was not like ordinary moss. It had a plush texture, springy and alive, and the glow it gave off seemed to come from deep within, like calmness made visible. The ceiling arched overhead, roots threading through it like slow, sleeping snakes. From some of those roots hung tiny droplets of water that caught the glow and turned it into pearly beads. They did not fall. They simply rested, as if even gravity had decided to be gentle here. The scent of mint was everywhere, not sharp, but soothing. It drifted through the chamber in waves, cooling the mind, smoothing the edges of thought. Beneath it was the smell of clean earth, like rain-soaked soil in spring. Brindle padded forward, paws sinking slightly into the mossy floor. In the center of the chamber was a shallow nest-like dip, lined with dried leaves and down. It looked as though it had been shaped by many small bodies, curling into rest over many nights. There were other chambers branching off from this central room, small tunnels leading to quiet spaces. One tunnel led to a pool, no bigger than a wide bowl, where water was so still it could have been glass. Another tunnel led to a pantry nook filled with acorn caps and tiny bundles of herbs. Another led to a nook that held smooth stones, arranged in spirals, as though someone had made a game out of patience. The burrow did not belong to Brindle alone. It belonged to the forest, and the forest belonged to it. Creatures came here when they were tired, when the wind had been too loud, when dreams felt tangled, when the world seemed just a bit too bright. They came to breathe the mint air and let the moss cradle their feet. Brindle placed the gathered comforts beside the central nest, and then, with the solemnity of a tiny librarian arranging precious books, tucked the feather into the nest's edge and set the mint sprig near the entrance, where its scent would mingle with the burrow's own. Then Brindle curled up, nose tucked beneath tail, and let out a sigh so small it could have been mistaken for the burrow itself. Exhaling, the moss glowed steadily, and time moved in slow, kind circles. A little while later, the ivy curtain at the entrance stirred again. This time, it was a different creature who arrived, stepping lightly, pausing as though to ask permission. A hare, tall and careful, with ears that twitched at every whisper of sound. Its fur was the color of moonlit wheat, and its eyes reflected the burrow's glow with a sleepy softness. The hare's name was Lumen, a name given because it had been born at dawn when the first light touched the dew. Lumen had spent the day running errands of a peaceful sort, delivering a message from a robin to a badger, carrying a small bundle of thyme to an elderly hedgehog, checking on a patch of mushrooms after the rain. It wasn't that the forest demanded such work. It simply offered opportunities for kindness, and Lumen accepted them. Now Lumen's legs ached with gentle fatigue, the kind of ache that didn't hurt but reminded the body it had lived a full day. Lumen entered the burrow and lowered its head in a quiet greeting, though Brindle was already drifting toward sleep. The hare padded across the moss and chose a nook near the water pool, where the air was coolest. The pool's surface was perfectly still, reflecting the glowing moss and the arch of roots overhead. Lumen leaned close and saw, not its own face, but a reflection of the woodland sky as it had been earlier, twilight blue, soft endless. That was one of the burrow's gentle magics. It remembered peaceful things and offered them back. Lumen breathed in the mint air. With each inhale, its shoulders dropped a little lower. With each exhale, its ears relaxed, no longer straining. The burrow seemed to hum, not audibly, but in a way the bones could feel, like a purr from the earth. Soon Lumen lay down, folding long legs beneath its body, and let its eyes close. The moss's glow warmed the edges of its fur, and the pool offered a steady silence like a lullaby without words. Outside, the forest continued. Leaves shifted. An owl floated between branches. A fox paused to sniff a mushroom and then moved on. Night arrived the way a blanket arrives, slowly, patiently, with no need to announce itself. Within the burrow, the quiet deepened. Not long after, there came another visitor, smaller than the hare, larger than the dormouse. A fox kit, not yet fully grown, with paws that still stumbled occasionally in excitement. Its tail was fluffy, and its ears were too big for its head, in a charming way. It approached the ivy curtain and stopped, peering in. Fox kits were curious by nature, and this one was no different. Its name was Saffron, because of a bright patch of gold fur at the throat. Saffron had heard whispers among the woodland creatures about a place that smelled like mint and felt like soft moss underfoot. A place where the mind grew quiet. But Saffron also knew, in the way young creatures know, that some quiet places were meant to be entered gently. So Saffron took a slow breath, sat for a moment to listen, and then eased inside. The burrow's glow lit Saffron's eyes wide, and for a moment the kit forgot to be quiet. But then the mint scent touched its nose, and something softened. It was as if the air itself said, in a gentle voice, "Slow down. You are safe. Rest is allowed." Saffron's paws sank into the moss, and the kit's excitement turned into wonder. It wandered carefully, nose close to the ground, sniffing the nest, sniffing the roots, sniffing the edge of the pool. It noticed the spiral of stones in one nook and tilted its head, as though considering a puzzle. But the puzzle didn't demand solving. It simply existed, patient and pretty. In a corner of the central chamber was a small shelf carved into the earth, lined with dried mint leaves, lavender sprigs, and tiny pine cones. Saffron's nose twitched. The kit nudged one pine cone gently, and it rolled a few inches, stopping against the moss with no sound at all. Saffron's eyelids began to feel heavy. The burrow had that effect. It didn't force sleep. It offered it, like warm milk offered in a cup. The kit chose a spot near Brindle's nest, but not too close, as though respecting the dormouse's space. Saffron circled once, twice, then curled up with tail over nose. For a moment, the kit's ears kept flicking, listening for the forest. But the burrow's hush wrapped around those flickers, smoothing them into stillness. 3 creatures now rested in the burrow of moss and mint, each in their own way, each held by the same gentle magic. And the burrow, as always, listened. The burrow's magic was not flashy. It did not sparkle or burst into color. It was the kind of magic that worked like breathing, quiet, steady, essential. It flowed through the moss and the mint-scented air, through the roots and the packed earth, through the still water and the spiraled stones. It gathered the scattered pieces of tired minds and arranged them softly like blankets being tucked around sleeping shoulders. Above in the forest, a thin mist began to rise from the ground. It moved between trunks, pale and unhurried. It curled around ferns and drifted over the hill. When it touched the ivy curtain, it seemed to pause, then slip inside, as though invited. The mist was another part of the burrow story. Long ago, when the hill was young and the forest less settled, a wandering spirit had passed through. Not a frightening spirit, but an old, dreamy one made of moonlight and rain. It had been tired from drifting between places. It had longed for somewhere to rest. The earth, kind and generous, had offered the hollow under the hill. Moss had grown quickly, thick and soft, and wild mint had sprung up at the entrance, as if to make the air fresh for the spirit's tired thoughts. The spirit had slept there, and as it slept, it had left behind a little gift, the ability for the burrow to hold peace, to gather calm, to remember gentleness and offer it back. Since then, the burrow had become a quiet refuge, not only for creatures, but for the very feeling of rest itself. The mist that drifted in now was like the spirit's breath, moving slowly through the chambers. It brushed over Brindle's curled body, and the dormouse sighed, paws twitching slightly in a dream. It drifted over Lumen, and the hare's ears relaxed even more, flattening slightly in contentment. It curled around Saffron, and the fox kit's tail loosened, no longer held tightly over the nose, as if trust had deepened. The mist moved onward, exploring the tunnels like a gentle visitor. It paused at the pantry nook where herbs hung in tiny bundles. It lingered at the spiral stones where patience had been arranged into shape. It hovered over the pool where the water reflected not just the ceiling, but the idea of a calm sky. Then, slowly, the mist began to glow faintly, adding its own softness to the moss's light. Outside, night deepened. Stars appeared one by one like slow blinks. The forest's sounds changed. Daytime birds quieted. Night insects began their steady singing. The burrow remained a pocket of warm hush beneath it all. Time passed in a way that didn't feel like passing. It felt like floating. In the central chamber, Brindle's dreams wandered through fields of tall grass where every blade carried a drop of dew. The dormouse dreamt of nibbling sweet berries, of finding the perfect hollow log, of curling beside friends in a heap of warmth. Each dream was slow, like a story told by someone who wasn't in a hurry to reach the end. Lumen dreamt of running across an open meadow where the moon was low and kind. The hare's legs moved in little kicks as the dream carried it forward, not in frantic chase, but in joyful glide. In the dream, the air smelled of mint every leap felt weightless. Saffron dreamt of discovering a secret door in the roots of a tree, a door that led to a room filled with soft moss beds and mint candies. In the dream, Saffron wasn't alone. There were other young creatures there, kits and pups and chicks, each curled up in their own little nook, safe and sleepy. The dream was so cozy that even in sleep, Saffron's mouth curved slightly as though smiling. The burrow listened to each dream and held them carefully, the way a pond holds fallen petals. At some point, another creature approached the hill. This one was slow and steady, carrying its home on its back. A tortoise, old and thoughtful, with eyes like polished stones. The tortoise had wandered far that day, not because it had to, but because it liked to move through the world at its own pace, noticing things. The tortoise's name was Mallow, because the scent of crushed mallow leaves always seemed to cling to its shell. Mallow had heard of the burrow long ago in a story told by a crow who had once perched above the hill and watched creatures come and go. The crow had spoken of the glow, the mint air, the moss-soft floor. Mallow had never been in a hurry to visit. Rest would come when it came. But tonight the air felt especially cool and the sky especially wide, and the idea of the burrow felt like a gentle invitation. Mallow arrived at the ivy curtain and paused, breathing in the mint scent that drifted out. The tortoise's breath was slow by nature, but here it slowed even more. Mallow stepped inside. The burrow's glow warmed the underside of Mallow's shell. The moss floor yielded softly beneath the tortoise's feet, and the sensation traveled up through the bones like a quiet message. You can let go now. Mallow moved toward the spiral stones, drawn by their patient arrangement. The tortoise lowered its head and examined them. Each stone was smooth, collected from the stream, arranged in a curve that tightened toward the center. It was a spiral that looked like a resting place for thoughts. Mallow did not disturb the stones. Instead, the tortoise settled beside them, tucking legs in, and allowed the spiral to exist as a companion. The mind, too, could spiral gently inward, not into worry, but into stillness. The burrow now held 4 sleepers, each with their own rhythm, each tucked into the calm, like a seed in soil. Outside, the mist drifted higher, and the hill looked like a sleeping animal under a mossy blanket. In the hours that followed, the burrow did what it always did. It collected softness. It gathered the day's sharp edges and smoothed them. It cooled busy minds with mint air. It offered moss as a gentle cradle. Sometimes the burrow's magic did more than soothe. Sometimes it quietly repaired. In a small side chamber, there was a patch of moss that grew thicker than elsewhere, forming a mound like a tiny hill within the burrow. Embedded in that mound were a few pale crystals, not bright, but softly luminous. They were not precious in the way of jewels. They were precious in the way of calm. The crystals had formed over many seasons, fed by the burrow's peace. They held a kind of quiet energy like stored moonlight. When a creature lay near them, the crystals seemed to hum, and the moss would grow warmer as though offering a gentle healing. Tonight the mist drifted toward that chamber. It hovered above the crystal mound, glowing faintly. The burrow's hum deepened, becoming a slow, steady pulse. Brindle in the central nest stirred. The dormouse had a small ache in one paw from climbing too quickly earlier that day. In waking life, it was barely noticeable. In sleep, it became a little knot in the dream. The burrow noticed. Without any fuss, without any bright magic, the burrow's calm flowed. The moss's glow seemed to brighten for a moment, and the mint scent became slightly stronger, as if the air itself had leaned closer. Brindle's breathing deepened. The paw relaxed. The ache loosened and drifted away like a leaf on water. Lumen, too, had carried a quiet tension in the shoulders from listening too carefully to the forest's many messages. The burrow noticed that as well. The hum moved through the hare's body, smoothing the tension. Lumen's dream shifted from running to simply lying in tall grass, watching clouds drift across a wide sky. Saffron had held a small worry, young creatures often did. A worry that perhaps the forest was bigger than the kit could handle, that perhaps tomorrow would demand too much. The burrow noticed the worry and did what it always did. It offered mint-scented air, moss-soft support, and a steady hum that said, without words, you are not alone. Saffron's dreams softened. The secret door in the roots opened easily. The room beyond was warm, and there was always space to rest. Mallow, old and steady, carried no sharp worries, but even the tortoise could benefit from the burrow's quiet. The hum wrapped around Mallow like a shawl. The tortoise's thoughts, which often wandered in slow circles, settled into stillness. In this way, the burrow did its work, and the night continued, slow and kind. At a certain point, far above, the moon reached its highest place. Its light filtered through the forest canopy and touched the hill, turning the moss silver. The ivy curtain shimmered faintly. Inside, the pool reflected the moonlight, even though the moon could not be seen from within. That was another gentle magic of the burrow. It remembered what was beautiful and brought it into places where it could comfort. A tiny drip of water finally fell from one root, landing in the pool with a soft plink. The ripples spread outward in perfect circles, slow and smooth, until it reached the edge and disappeared. The ripple was like a reminder. Even small movements can be peaceful. The burrow's sleepers remained undisturbed. The ripple did not demand attention. It simply happened, and then it was gone. Outside, the forest's night song softened. Insects quieted one by one, the wind slowed. Even the stream seemed to hush, its voice lower, as if it too was growing sleepy. The world became wrapped in a deeper quiet. In the burrow, the moss's glow began to dim slightly, not because it was fading, but because the night was turning toward its deepest hour, when all lights become softer. The mint scent remained steady, cool, and gentle. Brindle's breathing was slow and even. Lumen's burrow's chest rose and fell like a calm wave. Saffron was fully curled, paws tucked, ears relaxed. Mallow seemed almost like a stone beside the spiral stones, but a stone with a living, steady breath. The mist, having done its quiet wandering, gathered again near the central chamber. It swirled lazily like cream stirred into tea. It touched the moss, and the moss seemed to sigh, releasing a little extra softness into the air. If someone could have listened closely, they might have heard a faint sound, not quite a song, not quite a whisper. It was the sound of the burrow's magic, settling like blankets being smoothed. The burrow was content. And then, as the night edged toward early morning, something else happened, something so subtle it could easily be missed. The forest, in its own way, thanked the burrow. Outside at the entrance, a fresh sprig of wild mint had grown, new and bright, as if the earth had decided to offer a gift. Its leaves were small and tender, and when the breeze touched them, they released a cool, sweet scent that drifted into the burrow. The mint was a promise. The burrow would continue. The peace would remain. Inside, the sleepers did not wake. They did not need to see the new mint. They only needed to breathe. The burrow's glow dimmed further, becoming a soft suggestion of light rather than a clear illumination. The chamber edges blurred into gentle shadow. Everything became dreamlike. The story, too, began to slow, as though it were settling down beside the sleepers. The forest above was quiet now. The moon, having watched for hours, began to lean toward the horizon. The stars remained, but they looked a little more distant, as if they were stretching in preparation for dawn. In the burrow, the moss held steady warmth. The mint air stayed cool. Together they made the perfect balance: comfort and clarity, softness and freshness, like a pillow turned to the cool side. Brindle's dreams became simpler, not fields and berries now, but a sense of being tucked in, safe. Lumen's dream became a single image, a wide meadow under a calm sky. Saffron's dream became the feeling of a door, always opening to warmth. Mallow's dream became a slow, steady drift, like floating on still water. Everything was easing downward, deeper into rest. And as you listen, it's easy to imagine that the burrow is not only beneath that mossy hill, but also somewhere closer, somewhere inside the mind, a quiet chamber you can return to whenever you need. A place where the air is cool with mint, where the ground is soft with moss, where thoughts can settle like leaves on a pond. The sentences grow softer now, shorter. The glow grows dimmer. The forest breathes in. The forest breathes out. The burrow holds its sleepers. It holds the quiet. It holds the gentle hum. The mint scent drifts light and clean. The moss cradles every tired limb, and there is nothing left to do. Only resting, only drifting, only the slow, steady comfort of being held in the hush The last ripples of thought smooth out. The mind becomes still water. The body becomes warm earth. The night becomes a soft blanket. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.